I'll show you my process for getting a completely blotch-free dark stain. I'll demo it using alder and cherry, which I like these woods because they're really easy to work with, they have awesome grain patterns, and they look good with dark stain, assuming you can do it without blotchiness. My approach uses a combination of an oil stain and a dye, and I'll go through some variations of a pre-stain sealer as well as a clear coat.
First is to start with sanding, and I start with either 80 grit or 120 grit, depending on how deep the machining marks are or any scratches that I need to get out. These sample pieces are in pretty good shape, so I'm starting with 120 grit. And then I go to 180 grit and I stop there. Every now and then I'll sand a piece to 220 grit, but usually 180 is plenty good enough. And I'll sometimes make marks with a pencil in between grits just to keep track of what I've sanded and what's still remaining to be sanded. After all my samples have been sanded to 180 grit, next is to apply something that'll penetrate the grain of the wood to promote a uniform acceptance of the stain. Some people use mineral spirits, but I find that a pre-stain conditioner works a little bit better. I'll try them both here just so we can see side by side. And I'll talk about using shellac here in a minute, but for now I'm going to use the pre-stain conditioner. There are a lot of different brands of these pre-stain conditioners. I've tried a few of them and haven't noticed much difference between brands. Just following the instructions on the can, I'm wiping it on liberally, allowing it to soak in, and then if there's any excess after about 10 or 15 minutes to wipe it off. For this first set of samples, I'm going to use a typical oil-based stain. I really like this particular color. And just to get a side-by-side comparison, I'm also applying it to a piece of raw wood without any conditioner. By the way, all of these initial wood samples are alder. I'm also going to do some samples on cherry coming up here in a few minutes. So with either the mineral spirits or the pre-stain conditioner, it gives a significant improvement, much less blotchiness than the raw wood.
And you can see even with the pre-stain conditioner, it's still really blotchy in a lot of areas. And I've just about given up on using oil stain entirely and gonna move on to gel stain.
I'm going to try out a couple of different brands of gel stain. Again, it's important to first apply a pre-stain conditioner, and after about 10 minutes, I can wipe on the stain. With these gel stains, it's important to mix it really good right before you apply it. One of these gel stains is a Minwax brand, and the other one is General Finishes brand. They're slightly different colors, but both are pretty dark stains. There's a very noticeable difference in the consistency as I apply each of these. The General Finishes gel stain just feels smoother, more consistent thickness and viscosity. So after wiping off the excess stain, they look pretty good, and let's compare. All three of these are with the pre-stain conditioner. This is the oil stain that I did earlier, this is the Minwax gel stain, and this is the General Finishes gel stain. And the more I've tried different brands of gel stains, the more I come back to General Finishes. The video doesn't do a good job of capturing it, but I believe it gives a more consistent finish, a bit less blotchiness, and just feels better.
And note that I have no affiliation with General Finishes or any of the products in this video. I bought them all with my own money, and these are the products that I use in my wood shop on a regular basis.
And so while the gel stain does look the best of what I've shown so far, it still has a little bit of dark areas here and there, and it really is not the perfect blotch-free finish that I'm looking for. To get an even better gel stain application with absolutely no blotchiness, I'm going to use shellac instead of the pre-stain conditioner. I believe you need to use it straight up, not thinned, but some people may recommend that you cut it with denatured alcohol, so I'll show each approach side by side. This one is 50% shellac, 50% alcohol. And this one is 100% shellac right out of the can. Note that I like spraying on the shellac, but it's no problem to brush it on if you don't have a spray gun. Either way, I think a good liberal coating is needed so it soaks in and fills the grain well. So I let the shellac dry a couple of hours and then I can proceed to apply the gel stain. I'm using the same General Finishes gel stain on each of these. This one was sealed with the shellac cut 50% with alcohol, and this one was sealed with shellac straight up out of the can. You can see that with the full strength shellac, it's really truly a blotch-free finish. And the sample with the alcohol cut shellac is really not that much different than the pre-stain conditioner. So if this is the style of finish you like, then it doesn't seem worth the effort to me to use the shellac. The pre-stain conditioner is so much easier. The sample that was sealed with the 100% full strength shellac has the totally blotch-free finish that I'm looking for. The shellac pre-stain coat did prevent it from getting dark enough, so I'm going to use some dye to tint the clear coat to make it a bit darker. I like this Trans Tint brand of dye. You can get it in a lot of different colors. When I'm using it as just a toner to darken and clear coat, I usually use the dark walnut color. It's pretty neutral color. I'm using Deft brand lacquer. Not sure why, it's just always the brand that I've used. About 10 drops of dye per 100 milliliters of lacquer. Well, that was kind of a squirt, so not a good demonstration of 10 drops, but I'll go with it. Now for this step, I do think it's best to use a spray gun and not brush on, just to get the toner color to go on consistently. Here I'm just comparing to the darker sample that I'm trying to match as I'm applying the toner. You can do a few coats of the tinted lacquer, as many as it takes to get the darkness you want, and then if you still want more lacquer on after that, just put on a few coats of clear lacquer at that point. So you may have noticed I didn't clean the dust off my sample before spraying it, and I have a pretty dusty shop in general to be spraying lacquer. So in between coats, and especially before the last coat of lacquer, I sand it with 220 grit or finer sandpaper. Or sometimes I'll use just a fine steel wool. Then I spray on the final coat of lacquer really lightly so that it dries pretty fast before more dust settles in it. And for my comparison work sample that I'm doing, I just put clear lacquer on right from the start. No trans tint dye needed on this one. After the lacquer's dry on both samples, let's compare my two most preferred approaches. Option A uses a pre-stain conditioner, then apply a General Finishes gel stain, and then a lacquer clear coat. And option B uses 100% full strength shellac as a seal coat, then apply a General Finishes gel stain, then a toner made with mixing trans tint dye with lacquer, and finally a lacquer clear coat. These are both good finishes. In a matter of personal preference, option B is completely blotch free, but some may think that using the tinted lacquer as a toner masks the grain too much. And option A is a little bit blotchy, but it does have a bolder grain reveal. Personally, I like the completely blotch-free option B. And still to come in the video, I'm going to demonstrate both techniques with some different colors of gel stain, show how the approaches work on cherry, and use polyurethane instead of lacquer for the toner and clear coat. Preparing some samples for 3 additional colors of gel stain, first applying a pre-stain conditioner to 3 samples, this is option A that I discussed earlier, and then applying a shellac seal coat to 3 different samples, this is option B that I discussed earlier. Here I'm using the Georgian Cherry gel stain on the 2 different seal coat approaches. And then Brown Mahogany. I'll show a comparison of the finished result of all of these in just a second. And then the color called Candlelight. I don't know why that's a hard name to say, but I'll leave links in the description for all the products I'm using in the video. For all the option B samples, I'm applying the tinted lacquer. And note that I'm using the trans tint color dark walnut on all of these, but you could use, let's say for the brown mahogany gel stain, you could use the brown mahogany trans tint color. Yeah, there are a lot of different color combinations you could do. And now for all of the option A samples, I'm just applying the clear lacquer right out of the can. So here are all the samples I've done so far. They're all in alder with option A, which is the pre-stain conditioner and clear lacquer. And here are all the samples with option B, which is the shellac seal coat with a tinted lacquer. I think I like the brown mahogany color the best. Up till now, all the samples have been on alder, but let's try it on cherry. I'm going to do a few different samples here so I can have a way to compare different clear coats, both a lacquer and a polyurethane. I'm using the brown mahogany color of gel stain. When applying the tinted lacquer this time, I decided to do a lot of coats and get it really dark just to show what can be done. This is probably too dark and hides the grain too much for my taste, but just as an example when you might do this, some people really like kitchen cabinets with a super consistent dark color. Okay, so my final set of samples is on cherry with using polyurethane for the clear coat. Here I'm spraying on the sample of option A, which is with no dye or tint. For the next sample, I add trans-tint dye to the polyurethane, the same as I did earlier with the lacquer. I used mostly dark walnut color, but I did mix in a little bit of red mahogany color, which I think looks pretty good on cherry. I'm using an oil-based polyurethane because it adds a bit of warmth to the color, but you could do this just as easily with water-based poly. This trans-tint dye seems to mix well with just about anything. Here I'm applying the first coat of the tinted polyurethane. And after it's dry, with polyurethane, it's really important to scuff up the surface in between coats. I'm just using a very fine steel wool, but sandpaper would also work. With the second coat of the tinted polyurethane, you can see the cherry wood becoming a really luscious dark color. I'm stoked with the results.
Thanks so much for watching, and if you think I've earned it, it'd be great if you hit that thumbs up like button and consider subscribing.